Now, to the person I'm going to bring aboard, he had a legendary rant about Major League Baseball uniforms. And then I appeared on his show um, agreeing with him because you can't lie about how these uniforms look. So, Major League Baseball has a major problem, and it starts with the uniforms. We also talked about the All Star games, so we're going to hit that. And let me stop delaying the moment where I use my own global network. And I welcome Jake the Snake Silva from the Snake Sports Talk Show. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic, man. We're almost there to Friday, and temperatures have been looking really, really good around here in the Denver area. So it's been a really nice day today.
Good, very good, very good. It's going to be a very nice day here, and a very nice weekend because I'm planning to slip into the combine at Lucas Oil Stadium.
Mm.
Hey, wife came home yesterday with the idea and said, "You think you can get us to and from Indianapolis?" I looked at her and I said, "Baby, let me research it. Let me see what I can do." Because as a lot of you know, I am disabled. So have to make my money doing this and getting donations from you guys, which I really, really appreciate because some people really came through for me. But I love doing this, and I'm going to turn this into a $1 billion a year business. That's just how I'm thinking right now. Speaking of thinking, what the hell was the NBA thinking putting on that farce of an all-star weekend?
Yeah, it was just so bad, man. But like I said, it ain't even just the NBA that's been kind of going through this wave. Like I mentioned before, I mean, the NHL All Star Game. I love the festivities that they've done. I mean, I've been to one in Vegas. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. But the 3-on-3, man, it's like it doesn't make any sense. If you're not playing a regular 5-on-5, why even have this All Star Game in the first place? Uh,
Absolutely.
I would have expected more from the NHL, but even for the NBA, I would have expected more effort because if you're that afraid of suffering an injury during an All Star game or whatnot, then just why even have the game in general? If there's not going to be that much effort, and I get it, they make history by scoring over 200 points, but at the
Mhm.
same time, if there's not going to be really effort involved, then it really doesn't matter up to this point.
It really doesn't. And the thing that continues to cross me is that they held All Stars Saturday, Friday, and Saturday at Lucas Oil Stadium, which holds about 60,000. You mean to tell me they couldn't draw 60,000 for Sunday night because they played it at Gainbridge Fieldhouse? And I wondered why the attendance was so low because, as I said, they played it at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Let's go back to Dallas. They've had All Star Saturday at American Airlines Center. Then at the last second, they flipped the game to what was then called Cowboy Stadium, and they sold it out.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And then at the same time, I mean, especially with the way that the Pacers have been playing, I would have expected at least a little bit more drawing a crowd. And I know a lot of people kind of are mixed about nothing against the state of Indiana, but we know that there are a lot of people that are pretty much mixed with the whole thing with as far as
Yep.
political standpoints. But at the same time, it's just like the Pacers have been playing really good. And something like an all-star game really should be better to at least draw a crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Jake Silva joining us here to kick off hour number 3, the first third hour of Snowman in the morning. And I hope y'all are enjoying it. Now to the piece that drove me crazy and made me laugh. Last Friday, this man talked about the baseball uniforms and how awful they are thanks to Fanatics. And I thought Fanatics was just that, for the fans. But while you were doing your monologue and I'm sitting here laughing my ass off, I took a look at the uniforms. Brother, they went the cheap route.
Yeah,
They
they did.
absolutely went the cheap route.
Oh, it was so bad. And like I said, I would have expected better from, a company like Nike, who has been, absolutely stellar in sales.
Mhm.
And to really kind of do something like this where they wanted to go, with Fanatics and whatnot, this kind of just feels like it's a slap in the face to the fans. Because,
Mhm.
first of all these regular, replica jerseys are normally at base price about $100, if not
Yeah.
more. That's
Yeah.
really what they are. So you're telling me that per $100 per sale of a jersey, no matter what it may be, whether it, you are getting like the replica version, or you are getting like the actual authentic stitched version, which probably costs more, like around the ballpark of 300. You're
Hmm.
telling me you could not come up with that to, at the very least, keep Majestic, or even keep, some of these really, really good embroidery companies, and we had to go through Fanatics for this? I mean, the pieces just don't really add up. And in fact, to even give you this point, the Kansas City Royals did something that the rest of the major league clubs needed to get on board on. When this whole fiasco ended up going on, they were the ones who actually changed the lettering in the back of their jerseys.
Hmm.
Now it's gotten larger because they even know. And Kansas City, they're not going to stand for something like this. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic that they were able to fix that up in, I'd say it was really like in a heartbeat. They were able to
Hmm.
help that with the players. But if we could honestly do this to where we could get these off the shelves and be better than that for, for the fans and even for the players as a whole, because I can understand it if you're trying to do it where, like, look, in spring training, do you really have to have names in the back of their jerseys? Like,
No.
you don't. It's spring training. I can
Hmm.
understand it if you're going to preseason games and these are just basically your spring training, attire. But
Hmm.
I better not see any of these by the time that opening day starts up.
Man, March 29th is going to tell a whole story about the look, and we mean this literally, the look of baseball. And I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I love my White Sox, but I got so much love and respect for the Kansas City Royals
Mm,
and for the way they handled this. And plus, my beautiful wife surprised me with a tour of Kauffman Stadium.
mm,
And and it was our last day in Missouri, and she told me the day before that I was going to Kauffman Stadium. And I'm sitting there going, wait, what? She says, I know it's on your stadium bucket list because that you want to see them all. So here's the first one. That was an anniversary present for me.
mm.
And I'll tell you what, man, I have kudos for every single member of that staff at Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. World class organization. And I mean that from the heart, because the person who gave me the tour guide, I thought, okay, I'm going to go through the stands and I'm going to sit in the luxury boxes because that's what um, my wife paid for. That's the level that my wife paid for.
Mhm.
But when I told my tour guide that I had beaten cancer, she didn't say a word. Yet, when we got on the elevator and she pushed the button marked media, she says, I have a present for you.
Mm.
I got to see the radio booth. I got to see the television booth, hold the microphone, and she's snapping, and my tour guide is snapping pictures, and I'm just enjoying it.
Wow.
I'm just enjoying it. So if y'all get a chance to check out a stadium, I highly recommend Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. World class organization. And
Oh,
kudos to
Kansas
the
City.
Royals for what they kudos to the Royals for what they did, like you said, for their uniforms.
Yeah, Kansas City is such a beautiful ballpark. I mean, Kauffman Stadium, I absolutely love the the actual, like, the whole water backdrop. I
Yes.
absolutely love that because of the fact that once those fountains are on, each time a home run is hit there in that very ballpark, like, everybody just erupts. They go absolutely nuts. We've had a World Series that was there in 2015 and in 14, and the postseason, every Royals fan that's there is always invested, and they're diehards and they love their baseball. And like I said, I mean, you live up in Missouri, you're one of two sides. You're either a Cardinals or a Royals. You could not afford to really, like, be a fan of one or the other, because it was just like that. That's just how they rolled things. It's just like when you look at the north and south ends of Chicago. I mean, you couldn't end up repping both of them either, because we know that both of them don't really like each other when it comes to rivalries. Yeah, but like I said, you catch a night game from there, it's absolutely incredible. And I think they do such a fabulous job with the stadium itself. And I mean, kudos to every single staff member that was there. I mean, the only closest thing I've ever done was I've done the original Yankee Stadium tour. I've seen a game when I was 6 years old. And then when I was 13, I got a chance to actually do the tour of the stadium and got a chance to walk right there at home plate amongst many different legends that have played in that very ballpark and just to feel the energy from there was just something that was absolutely special. But kudos to the staff there in Kansas City. That is such an amazing moment to really just, relive for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
It really is. It really is. Speaking of Vegas, they just recently hosted the Super Bowl,
Mhm.
and Vegas went absolutely crazy.
Oh yeah.
Vegas went all out in decorating Allegiant Stadium in
Mhm.
Radio Row. And I had a few friends that attended Radio Row. I couldn't for health reasons, but my goal is to get to New Orleans and Radio Row there and Super Bowl 59 in the Superdome, which is a stadium I've always wanted to visit.
Mhm.
But man, some of the pictures that my friends sent me from Radio Row in Vegas and then from Allegiant Stadium, I'm doing a alternative play-by-play call here in my office. And my wife comes in and goes, just think about New Orleans and then Santa Clara.
Yeah.
She's like, you couldn't make your health went sideways and you couldn't make it, but you're doing better. And just think you're gonna be in the middle of this madness next year. How's that for encouragement, man?
Oh man, I mean that's kind of the goal. Like I mean I had the blonde blitz that was on my show, not a couple days ago where I had Nikki Gist and I had Deb Wickhus. Absolutely great individuals, very smart, and they shared a lot of their experience when they were up there in Vegas. And now the unfortunate part was, like usual business. I mean, they were everywhere. They were in media rows. They were in
Yep.
so many different they were at so many different like booths where they were talking to a lot of different players, from previews of the Super Bowl. So it
Hmm.
was great to kind of be down there, but it was amazing too to be down on the field itself when during media day and getting a chance to really experience, Allegiant Stadium as a whole.
Hmm.
So that's my goal, for next season is I would love to be there, in the Superdome in New Orleans at the very least, taking a trip there to be a part of Media Row and just to be able to have the Snake Sports Talk Show showcase from there and, really just enjoy, this once in a lifetime opportunity. But Allegiant Stadium, it's absolutely incredible. I know I always like to troll upon it because it basically is shaped like a giant Roomba for a lot of Raider fans. But, in the end, I've been to one event there at that stadium for WWE SummerSlam years ago. And even I thought they put on an absolute fantastic show. I mean, every single one of the wrestlers that came out, they all put on a great show. The medias and whatnot. The only thing that was a technical difficulty was the concessions. Every single one of the concession machines all just blacked out. Nobody knows what happened. Nobody knows how it even happened. But that was the only thing that was the problem. But in the end, it was still such a great event to be down there and just enjoying it because that was my first ever in person like wrestling event, and it did not fail at all for me.
Let's both kick ass this coming season, beginning with the draft. I'm going to be at the combine, and let's meet in New Orleans at
Yes,
Radio Row. I'm
I'm
already
down for
planning.
that.
I'm already planning what banner I'm going to use, the backdrop, and everything. Let's just meet each other there in the Superdome on radio because I have a feeling the Radio Row is going to be inside the Superdome.
Yeah.
They've
Mhm,
given that so much. They've given that place so much renovation. I'm dying to see it. I'm dying to get there for Radio Row
mhm,
next year. And of course, I definitely want to get to Santa Clara since that's the stadium for my favorite team, of course, the 49ers,
mhm,
who may wind up hosting it. You never know with
mhm.
how good they are. Listen, let's go there. I've had so many people hate on my team saying Kyle Shanahan couldn't win the big one. He couldn't win the big one. I consider it a successful season when you come within 3 seconds and one play in overtime of winning the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
And a lot of these people, except my friend the playmaker, he's a fan. He's a fan of the Rams. The Rams did win the Super Bowl and beat us to get there.
Mhm.
He's off the hook.
Yeah.
But some of my other friends saying, "Ah, your team didn't win." how did your team finish?
Yeah.
Eh? And of course, who am I getting trolled by the most? Cowboy fans.
Mhm.
I'm getting trolled by Cowboy fans the most, and they're saying you suffered the same fate we did. Yeah, big difference. One, we kicked your ass when you came to Santa Clara, and two, we came within 3 seconds of winning it all.
Mhm.
How close have you been to an NFC championship, let alone a Super Bowl? So I ask you this, my friend. Why do people continue to hate and troll on Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers?
I think the part of that is because I mean the narrative goes all the way back to the time when the Atlanta Falcons were in the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots when Kyle Shanahan was an offensive coordinator. But the thing you got to realize is, and I have talked to a bunch of people about this because I even had the same similar come to Jesus moment, conversation when it came to Ohio State fans freaking out over Ryan Day. I was like,
Mhm.
slow down. First of all, this is Ryan Day that we're talking about with Ohio State, which Ohio State, and he's 56-7. Okay.
Yes.
It's one thing if you're losing to Michigan State
Right.
and you're losing to Minnesota and you're losing to a lot of different Big Ten teams that's not named Michigan. Okay.
Right.
It's one thing to basically be pissed about that than to
Mhm.
basically say, "Oh, he can't beat Jim Harbaugh." Jim Harbaugh is a once in a lifetime coach, a former
Right.
player, and a great coach who sees player personnel. So
Agree.
Michigan, first of all, Michigan was on a mission. So that had nothing to do with whether or not, if Ryan Day is even the right coach for Ohio State. It had nothing to do with it. First of all, Michigan was dealing with the Big Ten committee. They
Yep.
were also dealing with the NCAA when it came
Mhm.
to the suspensions of Jim Harbaugh and the way they handled it. They
Right.
basically gave them the big finger to the NCAA whole body and to the Big Ten because it was a disappointment. So
Mhm.
Michigan had a mission to win the entirety of this whole thing. So
Right.
by that point, Ohio State didn't even do terrible. I didn't even think their quarterback, Kyle McCord, was that bad either. I thought he was a pretty good quarterback. And now, again, now he transfers to Syracuse. They now have Will Howard, who I do believe is going to transform into being a really good pocket passer. And now they've got, Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator there. So, or I should say, Chip Kelly now is the offensive coordinator. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about. They got really good guys there in that building. But however, Kyle Shanahan is one coach the Niners know they are not the same without. We felt this way about them since Jim Harbaugh left. So the thing about, with Kyle Shanahan at the time is like we said, we all remember the history with, the Atlanta Falcons when they lost, the 28-3 lead.
Yep.
And at that point, San Francisco, after Jim Harbaugh, they were not the same organization. Everybody remembers, the history behind that when that
Oh,
happened.
brother.
But the thing about it is that San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle Shanahan is a very offensive centric coach who is very innovative. Now, I know a lot of people try to throw in, well, remember the time before he had Jimmy Garoppolo and he couldn't find his
Yep.
quarterback? And
Yep.
we're like, okay, the record itself speaks for itself, but here's the thing. Look at a lot of the quarterbacks. These were like a bad batch. So you can't really give that much blame into Kyle Shanahan for having that for being dealt that kind of card. So
Right.
once after Jimmy Garoppolo was there in San Francisco, I mean, the defense was great, but the only difference was about that team that made that Super Bowl is they did not have a star left tackle. They did not have Christian McCaffrey. So it was just a young Debo and a young George Kittle.
Mhm.
They weren't quite, stapled into the league just yet.
Right.
So that now you look at San Francisco, and yes, they have a loaded team, they have a loaded offense, but at the same time, think about how close it was of the game itself. It was a
Oh my
one
gosh.
possession game.
Yeah.
Problem, and think about this, is that San Francisco was able to march this down to the opponent's 10.
Mhm.
Okay, once they won that coin toss, and they played in overtime, they made it that far. The
Yep,
problem of it was they did not go in for the kill for the score,
exactly.
which
They
is
did.
one of the
They
things
didn't
you've
finish
got to
it.
be able to do.
They
Because
did. They didn't finish it.
and
I guarantee you, they're going to finish it in New Orleans next year. I'm saying it right here. They're going to finish it in New Orleans because who is going to touch San Francisco in the NFC as loaded as they are? And early reports are coming to me that they're looking at defense at the scouting combine. Do they need help on the offensive line? Sure, but I think they're set on the offensive line. That's just me. They're going to look for some depth on the offensive line.
yep.
But when you have a fellow named Trent Williams, you can just run behind him all day.
Hmm.
Okay. I.e., Christian McCaffrey being the league's leading rusher. And I think there's a lot of hate thrown toward the 49ers. And I'm not saying this just because that's my favorite team. I'm saying this because I've seen it before with Jimmy Garoppolo. They're throwing a lot of hate at the 49ers because of one person and one person only. And you know the name I'm going to say, Brock Purdy.
Yep. Well, and like Brock Purdy, and here's the other thing. I mean, account for a lot of the quarterbacks that Kyle Shanahan has had. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he's had Jimmy Garoppolo, who
Mm-hmm.
is a very accurate quarterback, but only when he is healthy is part of
Yes.
his limitations. You
Yes.
also look at some of the other quarterbacks he's had in the past, like between CJ Beathard
Mm-hmm.
and Nick Mullins. And these were not superstar quarterback guys. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what it may be with San Francisco, and they did try this. They tried it with Trey Lance. Trey Lance did not make the cut. And by
Right.
the way, I'm going to be speaking about this too, but the 2021 draft of quarterbacks are all losing quarterbacks except for Trey Lance.
Yep.
Isn't that really interesting? So it tells you a little bit about the organizations they play for and the currency that they're in.
Mhm.
Now, it didn't work with Trey Lance. They kind of, ripped the band-aid and they let this go. And then Brock Purdy being the last pick in the draft, making it all the way to the NFC Championship twice, which one of them being hurt, but at the same time, he is a good distributor of the ball. He's a gamer, and he is somebody that even if he's not that hyper athletic as a Mahomes, he's a gamer. He's willing to make the right plays and the right throws as Kyle Shanahan instructs him to do. Now, I will say, if there's any team that's closest that could match in San Francisco's caliber, I think we might see Detroit again next year.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
with their grit and the way they kind of handled a lot of things, and the whole staff is back. I mean, there's unfinished business there.
There
So
is.
that's where I think for San Francisco, if they really want to get back into this thing, that's going to be one team that's going to be knocking up on the doors because, I mean, look, Dallas, you didn't win that game against Detroit. You
No.
did not win that game.
No.
You got lucky enough because penalty calls were horrible.
Mhm.
Apparently, no, but apparently somebody did not end up checking in when clearly he did.
Yeah, he clearly did. You saw it. You
Yeah.
saw it. I saw it. He walked up to the referee to make sure he was checked in. Another offensive lineman walked up and checked in with him. I
Yes.
mean, how can you mess that up?
Yeah, and that is a game they lost because when you watch that conversion, that was a beautiful play. And
Oh
then
man.
all of a sudden, when the penalty started throwing, that was where things got out of control. It
Yep.
was just where this is ridiculous. And then yet Dallas escaped the bullet and say, "Oh, we won." No, you didn't.
No,
You
you
didn't
didn't.
win.
You had that game handed to you.
Yes,
You
100%.
had that game. They had that game handed to them because the referees messed up and they were trying to cover their ass. You saw it, I saw it, my wife saw it, and she says, "Why didn't that count?"
I've said it before. I said, "Tell me you didn't check in without telling me you didn't check in." And then sure
Exactly.
enough, I mean, you could see not only Taylor Decker, but you could
Mhm.
also see the other lineman. He got pissed when you got down on the field and
Oh
you
yeah.
heard the microphone. Oh, he was pissed.
Oh yeah.
He was not having any of it. And
He was
so,
he wasn't having any of it, man. He wasn't.
no,
He was having none. He was having none of it. He
yeah,
clearly checked in. His offensive line mate was pissed off that they allowed that thievery to happen. One more thing before we move to the second half of the hour. It goes like this. I've had so many people ask me why I hate Justin Fields. I don't hate Justin Fields. I just think he's an incomplete quarterback. And when I say some of the things I see with Justin Fields that are a problem, his footwork, his accuracy, his time in holding the ball, okay, always wanting to run first instead of trying to distribute the ball, they come back to me, and I'm sure as hell they came back to you with, isn't he supposed to put his team in position to win? Yeah, but he's also required to make the correct plays. And I'll give you one stat. Everybody wants to point to the stats, the yards, the touchdowns, everything. I'll point to one stat which tells me Justin Fields is going to be a mediocre quarterback. 10 and 29.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Did you win it? Did you win or you lose? Or did you lose?
Mm-hmm.
Basic question.
Yeah.
He's lost more than he's won. Why don't people understand that when it comes to Justin Fields?
Mm-hmm. Now, I do think a part of this is that, again, Chicago has been unwilling to pivot to offense.
Right.
And I did have a really good friend of mine, Mike Hughes, who basically covers everything Chicago sports, who's a
Mm-hmm.
very, very good friend of mine. And I had to get an explanation of it because I had
Yeah.
to get an explanation about the draft pick. I had to get an explanation of, Caleb Williams and then Justin Fields because it just seemed like it was just an absolute just um, it was just an absolute pinball bouncing around.
Right.
I couldn't, I
Right.
couldn't, I could not get to the point of what exactly Chicago was going to do come the draft. Now, I don't think like Justin Fields is a bad quarterback for a few reasons. Number one, he's willing to move out of the pocket. He's got
True.
great feet.
True.
Now, I do think he is willing to throw the ball accurately 15 plus yards.
Mm-hmm.
However, a lot of this is when he's under duress and he does not have any of his options open,
Mm-hmm.
which Chicago is very notorious for not supporting their quarterbacks. It
Very
does get
that's
harder.
that statement has been true since 1985.
Yes, it
All
has.
right. That statement, even though they won the Super Bowl that year and won it dominantly, that statement you just said about not Chicago not supporting their quarterbacks, that's been true since 1985. Matter of fact, that's been true since 1984 because had they done their homework, they'd have seen Jim McMahon, love him dearly, was always hurt.
And here's what's funny. Here's a good stat for you, too. So, in the last 20 years, we have two notorious teams that are in the NFC North, the
Yep.
Packers and the Bears.
Packers and Bears.
The Packers in the last 20 years had three quarterbacks:
Mm-hmm.
Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and now Jordan Love
Now Jordan Love.
in 20 years. The Bears in 20 years has had 38
38.
starting quarterbacks. That should tell you
38
something.
to 38 starting quarterbacks to 3 starting quarterbacks. Okay, let's do that again. 38 starting quarterbacks for the Bears compared to 3 for the Packers.
And people are thinking, oh, it's just luck. No, it's not.
That ain't luck.
Green Bay is such a well-ran and patient organization. They
Mhm.
don't panic. It just shows you a lot about how strong Brian Gutekunst really is.
Yep.
And when you start to really generate this,
Mhm.
when you start to really kind of see this from deep down, the Packers know exactly what they're doing. Look at Jaden Reed. The kid,
Yes.
the kid was an absolute stud. And
Man, Jaden Reed killed us in the divisional.
oh,
All right.
yeah.
They finally the 49ers finally made the adjustment to put Travarius Ward on Jaden Reed, but it wasn't one of the big receivers. It was Jaden Reed that killed us.
Yep. And that was the biggest bullet that San Francisco could possibly dodge. It was
Yep.
the biggest bullet because here's the thing. Even speaking up for the Cowboys, you want to talk a lot of this stuff, but you were a wild card exit.
Mm-hmm.
You allowed Green Bay and Jordan Love throwing deep balls downfield,
Easy.
regardless, even if you did or you didn't have Trayvon Diggs, you allowed this to happen,
Mm-hmm.
which is part of the curse of Mike McCarthy.
Yep.
because you apparently cannot seem to get the last laugh against Green Bay.
Mm-mm.
So, and it clearly showed. And so Dallas was ultimately fool's gold. They're that desperate salesperson that we keep seeing every single year to telling us, "Oh, that's this nice shiny car is trustworthy, it's reliable." And then by the time the percentage drops down as it leaves the yard, it's just nothing but a clunker. But it just
Exactly.
looks differently. And
Mm-hmm.
that's who Dallas has become. And so Green Bay, like they've always had a bright future. They now have a young receiving core that they're going into year 3 and year 2, and they're building with Jordan Love, which is one of the things that Green Bay is smart to doing because even with Brett Favre, they were grooming up for Aaron Rodgers to be at his absolute best. That's what
Mm-hmm.
helped to give him Donald Driver at the end of it, and Greg Jennings and Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb, all the way to Devontae Adams until it was ready for Jordan Love. They did the same thing when it came to Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson and now
Yep.
Jaden Reed. So this is not coincidence for the Packers.
Not
This
at
is
all.
their standard. And unfortunately, Chicago's standard is we focus on defense and that's it. They
Mm.
don't pivot to offense. However, I will say from last year was a better take on it because Cole Kmet is a very capable tight end.
Very much.
Their offensive line got better with Tevin Jenkins and a couple players, but I
Mm-hmm.
think they should add more depth as you should for a franchise quarterback.
Yep.
But you also need to add another star receiver next to DJ Moore. If you don't do that, Chicago's not going to perform well. And at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, what's their run game honestly going to be with, Khalil Herbert? And it's just, I'm not
The,
sure.
the stupidest move the Bears did was to let David Montgomery walk.
And he's
You-
a lethal force next to Jameer Gibbs in Detroit.
Yep. Yep. They ran wild in the playoffs.
Yeah, they did.
That's why Detroit is where they are and the Bears are where they are. And we are up against the break. But Jake the Snake Silva joining me, man, you better come back. I mean it. You better come back.
Hey, I'm always down to do collaborations like this.
I love it. I love it. It's the Snake Sports Talk Show. You can find it on YouTube. And man, we got to do this again. I mean, we got to do this more often while we prepare our content for the Superdome in New Orleans next February.
Absolutely. I'm totally down for it. That's exactly the goal that I have for this upcoming year.
Same here, man. Same here. I will meet you in New Orleans.
See you up in New Orleans, man.
Man, if y'all want to have some fun with us, just find us. If you make it to Radio Row, find us at the Superdome in New Orleans.